Hey Summoners, so it is the debut season of Emblem Celica. I have finished the true solo of her map with Hubert, and this map has some unusual features that you might not have noticed in a casual playthrough, so I thought it would be fun to take you through how I solved this and just show you some of the things that you might not have noticed about this map if you just played it through naturally. So if you're not familiar with what a true solo is, I will be doing all of the combat on the map with Hubert. He is not allowed to have any support in movement or combat at all from his allies. They're not allowed to soak chills for him. Essentially, I'm going to be treating Hubert as if he were the only unit on the map when it comes to combat. Now, obviously, I do have 4 units here, and the reason for that is you actually just can't enter hero battles with less than 4 units unless they are a limited hero battle. Now, of course, serious soloers can't choose which limited hero battles there are when we're run, so you can't use a specific unit of your choice unless you do it this way, and that's why true soloers will always have 4 units on the map, despite the fact that only one of them is doing combat. The fillers aren't allowed to help in combat in any way. Like I said, they can't soak chills, they can't give him drives, they can't give him any type of support. However, because they are on the map and just having 4 units on the map will affect enemy AI, we are allowed to use them to encourage the enemy AI to move in one direction or another, because that's just how it works. So we will be doing a little bit of that today, but they won't be doing any fighting. It will all be up to Hubert. Now, to just have a basic look at the map, something we do when we start a trousseau. Of course, you probably know this already, but if you haven't seen for some reason, Celica has a very oppressive attack range. If we look at her just here, it looks like she's not got much of an attack range. However, as soon as we move a unit into range, you will see that in fact she does have a 6-tile attack range, which is, you know, the entire danger zone right here, and so there are very few tiles available for us to move on this map. This is particularly relevant for our fillers who can't get involved in combat. We have to keep them out of combat at all costs. You can think of it kind of like an escort quest, basically. Just our escortees are about as smart as I am. I can do whatever I want with them as long as they stay out of trouble. That's one unique feature of the map. Celica's really oppressive range. It means that the few tiles that are not in her range are kind of difficult terrain, maybe flyer exclusive terrain in case of the water up top. The other thing that's really interesting about this map is that there are mixed AI styles here. So what we typically see in our Abyssal hero maps is that the enemy units are going to be very aggressive. All of them except for the boss typically move on turn 1 towards you. However, in this one, we see mixed AI styles. So some of the units are going to move towards Hubert, others are not. As you can see, this green mage here and this red mage here will stay there until turn 5 or until someone moves within their range. This is really unusual. This we only see typically in bound hero battles and grand hero battles have this style of AI, but we never really see them mixed. That's quite unusual, and I think it's a direct reference to Celica's Engage map, which this map is based off of. So they were paying quite a bit of attention and made quite a faithful recreation of that map, and it's a dang problem, I'll tell you that much. This guy has a 60, I think, res check on his ploy. He's covering a huge portion of the map with the ploy, and this is a big problem again because Hubert has no support. Hubert's not a unit that's meant to tank things. He is very vulnerable to exposure and that res debuff, and that can be quite problematic, so we're gonna have to work around those guys. The last thing that's really unique about this map are these 3 units that spawn in the middle here. Now, when we talk about spawn patterns in maps, typically there's sort of like 3 typical ones, I would say. You get either side spawns, which come in from either side, makes total sense. You get back spawns, which is relative to where your starting area is. So again, top right, very odd starting area, but also is a direct reference to Emblem Celica's map, so that makes sense. A back spawn on this map would be from this top right corner, or very near to it. In this map, we have a great deal of mid spawns. They all kind of just spawn in the middle, and that ends up being quite important in that we can bully them. So if you see this thief right here, This is where he wants to spawn, but I don't want him to spawn there. He's a little bit inconvenient right there. So instead, we're gonna roll this back. We're gonna set up our proper arrangement for clearing. Now, I often leave swaps in at the start of my clears, and the reason I do that is because in certain scenarios, the slot order of your team can matter in terms of AI manipulation. It doesn't come into effect in this one. However, many times it does. And so I have gotten into a habit of always setting Hubert as my 4th slot. And so the reason I leave swaps in at the start of a clear is so that you can see how I had them originally set up before I begin the clear, just in case anybody needs to check it or wants to replicate it. That's the reason it stays in. But we're gonna get everybody set up to the desired slots and move them around. Now,
I wonder where to. Fine.
I have talked about using our fillers to manipulate the enemy AI and movement. What we're going to be doing here is we are going to be moving this Manakete to this spot where that thief wants to spawn. And we're gonna do that right now by making Hubert the desired target for this Manakete this turn. I may not always want him to be the target, however, and that's why I've chosen a bunch of fillers with relatively similar res stats. Dorothea's got a really low defensive stat, but she's got Mystic Boost, and so these Manaketes are going to be looking at her res stat when they're thinking about who to attack. And Lilith has a really unique kit, but we'll get to that later. So what we've done here to start is this Manakete is going to come up here, and we are going to move that thief into a much more favorable position for us. Now, we've got a lovely little ploy tower going, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to pick off this Lance Knight. It is very annoying, it is the wrong color, and even though PvE saves are very much a pushover compared to most of what PvP saves would throw at us, remember we, have no support, so we can't hit quite as hard as a PvP tooled unit. And also, because we have no support, we're in charge of keeping ourselves alive, and so we can't actually build quite as offensive as we would for, say, a PvP scenario. Now, I built a Hubert in a very specific way for this map, and it is also kind of unusual. I don't usually like using rouses on builds because when you're using a true solo unit, again, you need to always think of them as if they are alone on the map, essentially. A rouse should always be on in that scenario, and so I need to position my filler units so that the rouse can always be on. I can't have them adjacent to Hubert at any point, otherwise I would lose that option. That creates some positional restrictions on my fillers that can be kind of annoying to work around. I was able to do it in this scenario, and that does let me power up my A skill a little bit, because Close Bonus Doubler has a player phase if I have bonuses, as opposed to Close Foil, which is enemy phase only. They do all have their niches in True Solos. I use Close Foil a lot still. It's still one of the best tools in my kit. However, in this particular scenario, I need to output a lot of damage to get rid of this Lance Knight right away, and it's super important because it is covering this whole squad. There are no sort of group warps on this map. There's no like guidance support or anything, and so it's really hard to get this knight to move. His slow speed actually helps him protect his team in this scenario. So I'm getting rid of him right away. It stinks. I have to invest a lot of resources to do this. However, I think it's the best thing in the long run. Another thing you might notice about this build before I hit end turn here is that I have no echo on. And the reason for this is that even with Lagu's friend dropping guard echo's DR to 5% instead of 10%, it is just enough to keep Hubert over the threshold of 70%. Now, Flare only heals under 70%. Above 70%, it does a different effect of doing more damage. However, I need to keep as much HP as possible, and so it's actually beneficial for me to drop my defenses just a little bit to make sure that at the end of this turn, I'm going to be under that flare threshold so that my last combat gives me the maximum amount of healing for going into the next turn. And then the last thing we are going to do for the turn is shuffle all of our fillers around, because like I said, we are going to be using them to manipulate where other units on the map are moving. So we're going to send this green Manakee back towards straight to the right, because we don't actually want to deal with him just yet. The important things this turn are this bow is going to go away, the one with the chill res. We don't want Hubert taking any more damage than he has to. Obviously, Hubert is not a unit made to tank, and so we are already working sorcery by just having him here, and this needs to go away. The other big thing that's going to happen here is this Miasma Dagger is going to come up. And now if you remember, Miasma Dagger is like a Savage Blow type effect. So it's going to come up, hit Hubert. Hubert's going to one-shot it because we tactically put it in range of our ploy. And the other thing that's going to happen is it's going to hit our fillers with splash damage. And that will become important later because we want our fillers to not have full health. So we are using the enemy's splash attacks against them. And again, here we are just under our 70% threshold, so we pop up to 52, and that's going to set up our next turn for us. The first thing we're going to do here is we're going to get our guys out of the way. Remember, they can never be next to Hubert for the rouse. And then we are going to move in range of this Axe Knight. Now, if we weren't at high health because I had guard on, this turn would be a big problem. Now, this cleric has that AI where it won't move unless it can attack something or until a later turn. And so what we're going to do is we're going to shift this Manakee up and to the left. That will allow our cleric to teleport up here with Dazzling Shift and make Hubert a target. Now, I don't know why this cleric hits so dang hard, but it really does. And unless we were at very high health here, this cleric would take Hubert under the 25% threshold, and that would make it impossible to do what we need to do on this turn. So, now that we've moved our cleric up, one of the things that's really difficult to deal with in true solos is flash. I only have one offensive action to all of the enemies that can attack me, however many actions they would have. If I lose my enemy phase, it is extremely devastating because by definition, I am outnumbered. Most of my combat has to happen on the enemy phase. And so we're setting this up in a very particular way to avoid the flash by making sure that I have flare charged here, and I've got my devoted basket online for that extra chip at the start of combat. It is really difficult to set up a special proc with Luku's friend because of the way it works. Typically what's happening is you're starting a combat, you don't have your special charged, the enemy attacks you, you get that special charge, and then you spend it right away, killing the enemy, and the combat ends. And so it's quite difficult to set up a scenario in which you have that special ready for a combat. However, because I couldn't counterattack the staff here because it had a dazzling effect, now I do have that special charged and I can get rid of this guy. So it's a really clean way of getting rid of this guy without him causing us a lot of problems. Now the next thing that's going to happen is this Lance Cav is going to come up and try to hit Hubert. Well, successfully hit Hubert. He will hit Hubert for a lot of damage. And it's unfortunate because Hubert won't be able to heal off of it because of the Fatal Smoke, which prevents healing in combat. Now he won't be able to apply Fatal Smoke because he will go down without being able to apply that effect that lasts for other turns, other combats. However, it's going to hurt, and we're not going to have a good way of healing off of it, except we do, because our hero, the green Manakee, can now reach us. And so because it does less damage than the Lance Cav, it's going to come in afterwards. We're not going to have that Fatal Smoke on us, and we will be able to clean it up to get that extra heal. The last thing that we are going to do this turn is we are going to use Reciprocal Aid on Lilith. And this is only possible because the Miasma Dagger hit us. If they were both at full health, I wouldn't be able to use this strategy. However, it's going to be very, very important on the next turn. So, it is now turn 5. Our guys who are anchored in place are going to start moving now. They are finally free of their turret positions. Most everybody is going to go up, chasing after these fillers up here. However, we do have these two down here separated from the group, which is great because I like not getting blown apart by Celica.
Is that so?
We're going to take out the red mage here because it does just enough damage to us to take us under 50%. And this is really cool because we're going to be using some Wings of Mercy tech here. Lilith can warp on her own, but I've got Wings of Mercy on her, so she's going to warp in down here.
It's already done.
And Paula is going to pivot over her. Now you will notice Celica's range is extremely oppressive at this point. She is covering this whole map. She is up to about this point in terms of where she can just warp in and delete us. And so we are just skirting the edge of her range. Dorothea is out of range, but there's really not much that I can do with my fillers to stop them from getting hit. And so we are going to have to put Lilith in range of this sword. That's okay. As long as we can stop Lilith from actually getting hit by the sword, we have to convince the sword that Hubert is the better target.
Hey Summoners, Editing Spirit here. I goobered this explanation up and made it sound way more confusing than it is when it's actually pretty simple. When the AI is determining what actions to take, it performs a series of checks, and it uses a list of tiebreakers to choose its actions. When it comes to choosing a target to attack, the AI first compares combat results. If the attacking unit defeats the defending unit, that's considered a win. If both units survive, that's a draw. And if the defending unit defeats the attacking unit, that's a loss. A win will always be chosen over a draw, and a draw will always be chosen over a loss. In this case, Hubert will be killing the sword fighter and show a loss, so I've built Lilith so that she would also defeat the sword fighter if they got in combat and show a loss to them as well. Because I forced a tie, the AI has to go down its list of tiebreakers to make its choice. The relevant tiebreaker in this situation is damage ratio. It looks at the damage dealt versus the damage taken and chooses the highest ratio using this formula. Because the decision is made based on the net change in HP, not just the damage dealt, this means that healing that comes into effect during combat is also factored into the decision, and the AI is heavily disincentivized to choose targets that will increase their current HP through combat. In our situation, Hubert will take 0 damage and heal 17 through Flare. Lilith will take 0 damage and heal 18 through Noontime. Hubert heals less and causes the same net change in HP as Lilith, therefore he is the priority target over Lilith. Also note that net HP changes are capped by maximum HP, so if Lilith only had the 7 HP missing that she did from the Miasma Dagger chip, 7 would have been the maximum she could heal, and we would have been unable to force the tiebreaker onto Hubert. This is why I'm using HP boosting weapons, skills, and effects on Lilith in conjunction with reciprocal aid from Dorothea. I had to magic up 18 points of missing HP on her without ever touching combat in order for this to work.
Now our bow and our green mage are going to keep moving towards Dorothea, and because we've switched Paula all the way down, Celica sees Paula as her favorite target and she's going to start moving towards her. Thankfully, she's just stepped inside of our ploy range. This fight is all about kill or be killed with Celica. We can just walk up and hit her with a basic attack. This is very unusual. This is not something that normally happens with true solos. Usually there are some very specific things about the boss that I need to play around, do some specific things. Celica is just that frail. Her gimmick really is her attack range, and so we've been playing around that this whole time, and we get to confirm the kill now. And now we're basically done. However, there's just one more thing. Dorothea is stuck up here, but we tooled the Lilith for that very specific health threshold. Not only so that she could do the negative damage trick with the sword, but so that Dorothea can just warp down onto her. And so from there, we are basically done. It's just cleanup. I do have to attack Celica from the lower tile because of the reins on this bow, but from here we have everything well in hand. There is nothing that can threaten Hubert anymore, and it is just a matter of time until we clean up. We have a nice little finish there, and that is how it gets done.